pair of archaeologists believe they found a lost city in the Amazon. New technology has unearthed the remains of an ancient civilization, and it's changing the way people think about our past.
Let me tell you something that almost nobody talks about. The Amazon rainforest is roughly the size of the entire continental United States. Think about that for a second. You could fit all 48 states inside it, and the trees would still swallow the edges. We have sent probes past Jupiter. We have photographed black holes 100 million light-years away. We have mapped the surface of Mars down to the size of a football field, but the floor of the Amazon, less than 30% of it, has been properly surveyed. That means we know more about the dark side of the moon than we know about what is sitting beneath that canopy right now. For over a century, explorers went in looking for lost cities and didn't come back. The jungle doesn't just hide things, it consumes them. A stone wall can disappear under moss and vine in a decade. A pyramid can look like a hill in 20 years. Whatever is under those trees has had thousands of years to vanish. But here is where the story changes. About 15 years ago, scientists started using a technology called LIDAR, and it flipped everything upside down. LIDAR stands for Light Detection and Ranging. Here is the simple version. You strap a laser scanner to the belly of a plane, fly it over the jungle, and fire billions of pulses of light straight down at the ground. Most of those pulses hit leaves and branches and bounce back, but a tiny fraction slip through the gaps in the canopy and hit the dirt. The computer collects every single one of those returns and uses them to build a three-dimensional model of the terrain below. Then you digitally strip away the trees, and suddenly you are staring at the bare ground, as if the forest was never there. It is like having X-ray vision for an entire continent. In 2022, a joint research team led by Dr. Mara Voss, a geophysical archaeologist out of Zurich, ran a LIDAR survey over a stretch of borderland between western Brazil and the Colombian frontier. This region had never been formally excavated. It was considered uninhabited wilderness, the kind of place that doesn't show up on anyone's priority list. When the data came back, the lab went dead quiet. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Because the ground beneath that jungle wasn't empty wilderness at all. The grid that shouldn't be there. What the LIDAR revealed was a grid, not a rough, approximate grid. A precise, engineered, city-scale grid. Perfectly straight roads, running for miles in parallel lines. Raised earthen platforms arranged at exact intervals. Wide, flat plazas surrounded by what could only be described as walls. And connecting it all, an intricate network of canals, cut with geometric precision into the jungle floor. Nature does not do this. Wind doesn't make straight lines. Rivers don't build squares. This was deliberate. This was planned. And by the sheer scale of it, this was the work of thousands of people over generations. The team ran the numbers. The mapped settlement covered over 35 square miles. To support a population living inside that kind of infrastructure, you need organized agriculture, water management, long-distance trade, and a governing structure capable of coordinating massive labor projects. These aren't the fingerprints of a small nomadic band scratching out a living in the jungle. These are the fingerprints of a civilization. But the roads and the plazas weren't the thing that made Dr. Voss sit down and put her head in her hands. It was what the LIDAR showed at the center of the map. Right at the base of a long limestone ridge that ran along the southern edge of the settlement, the scan picked up an anomaly. A perfect oval shape, roughly 40 meters across, pressed into the rock face like a massive thumbprint. It wasn't a cave entrance. The surrounding rock was solid, unbroken. But the density readings on that oval were completely different from the limestone around it. Denser, harder. And the surface had a chemical signature that matched something the team had never seen in a geological context before. It looked like the rock had been heated, not by a campfire, not by the sun, by something intense enough to partially fuse the outer layer of the cliff face into a solid seal. Someone had closed this place, and they had closed it to last. Into the green darkness. Getting there was its own ordeal. The site was over 300 kilometers from the nearest road. The terrain between was a wall of primary jungle, swamp, and river crossings with no bridges and no paths. The team had to machete their way through sections so dense the sun barely reached the ground. It took 22 days on foot. Then, 2 days out from the ridge, they found the first thing that stopped everyone cold. One of the local guides was clearing moss off a rock face when he stepped back and said very quietly, "This is not gray rock. This is red." It wasn't rock. It was paint, and it went on and on and on. What stretched across that cliff face was a mural unlike anything ever documented in the Amazon. Over 90 feet wide, painted in deep red ochre and black manganese pigment, with a level of detail and scale that modern researchers had simply never seen in this part of the world. But the content of the mural is what froze everyone in place. No jaguars, no tropical birds, no scenes of river fishing or forest gathering. Instead, the animals on this wall were enormous, and most of them were extinct. There were mastodons, relatives of the elephant, gone from the earth for over 12,000 years, painted with enough anatomical accuracy that a paleontologist could identify species from the brushwork. There were giant ground sloths, not the small tree-climbing creatures we have today, but the Ice Age variety that stood nearly 4 meters tall, moved on hind legs, and had claws the length of a human arm. There were creatures that don't even have common names anymore because there is no one alive who remembers them. The fact that someone painted these animals in this level of detail means only one thing: they saw them. They lived alongside them. And that dates this mural to at least 12,000 years ago, placing it firmly at the end of the last ice age. Then the pigment analysis came back, and the story got bigger. The red ochre used for the paint didn't come from the local hillside. The chemical signature was matched to mineral deposits found over 500 kilometers away in the Andes foothills. These people weren't just painting what they saw. They were sourcing specialist materials from half a continent away and carrying them home. That takes planning. That takes trade routes. That takes a level of social organization that the mainstream history books said simply didn't exist in this region at this time. But Dr. Voss wasn't done looking at the mural, because the scene it depicted wasn't peaceful. It wasn't a nature diary or a hunting record. Everything in it was running. Every animal, every human figure, every creature on that cliff face was depicted in motion, fleeing from the right side of the image toward the left. And in the upper right corner, the source of the panic. A circle, surrounded by jagged lines radiating outward in all directions, bright, violent, like a second sun that shouldn't have been there. One of the team's astronomers spent a night running calculations. The star positions in the background of the mural, painted as small dots above the fleeing figures, matched the night sky as it appeared around 10,800 years before the Common Era. This was not decoration. It was a timestamp, and it pointed to one of the most catastrophic events in human prehistory, the Younger Dryas impact. The door the mountain swallowed. The Younger Dryas was a period roughly 12,800 years ago when the Earth's climate lurched violently in a matter of decades. Temperatures plummeted, then spiked. Glaciers advanced and retreated. Megafaunal extinctions cascaded across multiple continents simultaneously. For a long time, scientists debated the cause. The current leading theory is a cosmic impact, a comet or asteroid breaking apart in the upper atmosphere, sending superheated fragments raining down across the northern hemisphere, igniting continent-wide fires and triggering catastrophic climate disruption almost overnight. The mural on this cliff face appeared to be a direct eyewitness record of that event, and the sealed door at the base of the ridge appeared to be the response to it. Up close, the oval seal was even stranger than the LiDAR suggested. The surface of it was glassy, almost smooth, covered in a pale mineral deposit called calcite, but denser and harder than any naturally occurring formation the geologist on the team had ever handled. The drill they used to take a sample wore down 3 bits before it got through. And then the compasses started behaving. Every magnetic compass within about 10 meters of the sealed surface began to drift. Not wildly spin, but pull, consistently, persistently, as if something behind the rock face was drawing the needle in. This ridge was made of limestone. Limestone is not magnetic. There was no geological reason for this, but there it was. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed what the LiDAR had hinted at. Behind the seal, there was a void, a large one, roughly the size of a cathedral nave, with walls and a ceiling the radar suggested were not entirely natural. Dr. Voss ordered the drill. It took 71 hours. The seal was not just thick rock, it was reinforced. The drill cores came back, showing layers of compacted mineral, interspersed with something harder that analysis later identified as a silica-based compound mixed with organic resin. Someone had engineered this seal. It wasn't a natural cave opening that happened to fill in. It was deliberately constructed and deliberately closed. When the bit finally broke through, everyone in the team heard it simultaneously. A slow, steady hiss, lasting almost 4 seconds. Pressurized air escaping from a sealed space. But this air didn't smell of rot. It didn't smell stale. It smelled sharp, metallic, like the air after a lightning strike. Like a thunderstorm had been captured in a jar 12,000 years ago and kept there, perfectly preserved, waiting for someone to open it. Dr. Voss widened the hole. She went in first. Inside the bone cathedral, the floor was the first shock. Not rough cave rock, not rubble. A flat, smooth, deliberately leveled surface, covered in a thick layer of deep black soil. Any archaeologist would have recognized it immediately. Terra preta, literally translated as dark earth. It's a man-made super soil found throughout the Amazon, engineered by ancient populations to be hyper-fertile and essentially self-renewing. Researchers are still trying to fully decode how it was made. It contains a specific mixture of charcoal, bone meal, organic compost, and microbial cultures that keeps soil productive almost indefinitely. Modern agriculture still cannot fully replicate it. Finding terra preta inside a sealed cave meant one thing. This space was not natural. It was constructed. It was managed. It was intentional. The ceiling arched 30 feet above their heads. The walls were reinforced with vertical columns of basalt, a dense volcanic rock that does not occur naturally anywhere near this limestone ridge. Every single one of those pillars had been quarried, transported to this location, and placed by hand. The structural engineering required to do that, to support the weight of a mountain using columns of imported stone, would challenge a modern construction team. The team walked deeper, following the paved path toward the interior. The silence was total. No insects, no bats, no sound at all except their own footsteps and breathing. The path opened into a central chamber. Lining the walls were bones, but they hadn't been dumped or piled. They had been set into the floor in arcing arrangements, each piece placed with precision. These were the ribs of mastodons, each one more than 2 meters long, curved upward and inward to form a series of interlocking archways along the walls of the chamber. It looked exactly like what it was: architecture. The builders had used the bones of Ice Age giants as structural and ceremonial elements inside their vault. The scale of effort required to transport multi-ton bones into this space and position them with this level of care was staggering. But at the center of the chamber, there was something more. A circular depression, roughly 3 meters across, set into the terra preta floor, filled to the brim with a liquid that did not move when they stepped near it, did not ripple, did not reflect light the way water does. It sat perfectly still and perfectly dark, like a hole cut in the floor of the universe. Dr. Voss crouched at the edge and lowered a sample instrument into it. The liquid was not water, not exactly. It was water, but saturated with metallic isotopes and a concentration of microscopic charcoal particles so dense it was closer to ink than fluid. The field test results came back sterile. Nothing living in it, nothing growing, nothing decaying. It was, in effect, a perfect preservation medium. A chemical environment so hostile to biological degradation that organic material placed inside it would last essentially forever. And floating in the black liquid, completely intact, were seeds. Not fossils, not impressions. Actual seeds, with viable cellular structure from plant species that do not exist anywhere on Earth today. Palms, medicinal shrubs, food crops, species whose closest modern relatives are found thousands of kilometers away or not at all. The botanist on the team spent 3 hours sitting on the floor of the cave going through them before she could speak coherently. These were the plants of the world before the catastrophe, collected, preserved, and stored against the day the world might need them again. The ark they left behind. The full picture came together slowly, but once it did, it was impossible to see it any other way. This was not a tomb. Nobody was buried here. This was not a temple in the religious sense. This was a vault, a deliberate, engineered, long-term storage facility built by a people who could see a catastrophe coming and chose to do something extraordinary about it. Along the far wall, behind the mastodon rib archways, the team found sealed ceramic containers packed in rows, each one sealed with a compound of beeswax and mineral resin that had held perfectly for 12 millennia. Inside, more seeds, dried root crops, compressed tablets of what appeared to be medicinal plant compounds, and something the geneticist on the team described as structured biological samples, preserved organic material arranged in a way that suggested deliberate collection of genetic information from multiple species. This was a doomsday seed bank. 12,000 years before we built the Svalbard Global Seed Vault in Norway, these people had the same idea, the same urgency, and apparently the same understanding of long-term biological preservation. They just executed it in the middle of the Amazon, inside a sealed mountain, using chemistry we are still trying to fully understand. And then, the geologist found the back wall. The far end of the chamber was coated in a thick layer of soot, not campfire soot, not torch residue. The spectral analysis showed it was the result of a high-energy heat event, something that had baked the rock to its surface in a fraction of a second. And embedded throughout that soot layer, in enormous quantities, were microspherules. Microspherules are tiny glass beads, barely visible to the naked eye, that form when rock or soil is exposed to temperatures so extreme that it partially melts and then instantly solidifies. They appear in two contexts in the geological record: cosmic impact events and nuclear detonations. Nobody was setting off nuclear weapons 12,000 years ago, but a comet breaking apart over the North American ice sheet absolutely could have sent a shockwave intense enough to reach the Amazon and cook the back wall of this cave. The Younger Dryas impact theory had been debated for years. Scientists had found microspherular layers in ice cores, in sediment deposits, in sites across 4 continents. But finding them embedded in the back wall of an engineered human structure in a region that has never been a priority for impact research was a different kind of evidence. This wasn't a geological record. It was a physical scar on a building that someone had just finished constructing when the sky fell. The cave wasn't abandoned. It was sealed from outside, or possibly from within, by people who knew what was coming and chose to preserve what they could, rather than try to survive it. The tools that crossed a continent. Near the edge of the black pool, arranged in a neat row on the terra preta floor, the team found tools, not rough stone flakes, not basic scrapers. These were finished, sophisticated instruments: blades, chisels, grinding surfaces, and a set of pointed instruments whose function the team is still debating. Every single one of them was made from obsidian, volcanic glass, and every single one was in pristine condition. No chips, no wear marks, laid out with the kind of deliberate care you use when you are leaving something behind for someone else to find. Here is the problem. There is no obsidian in the Amazon basin. The geology does not produce it. To find volcanic glass of this quality, you need to travel to the Andes. The nearest known obsidian source to this site is over 1,000 kilometers away, across cloud forest, mountain passes above 4,000 meters, and some of the most physically demanding terrain on the continent. Someone carried these tools across all of that, or had them carried, or traded for them through a network of intermediaries spanning the breadth of South America. Any of those explanations requires the existence of a long-distance exchange network operating with a level of organization and reach that the conventional timeline says simply wasn't there yet. But the evidence is sitting in a sealed cave at the base of a ridge, in the middle of the jungle. So the conventional timeline is going to have to make some adjustments. And the obsidian tools are actually the smaller half of the trade network story, because the basalt columns holding up the ceiling, those came from volcanic formations at least 200 kilometers to the northeast. The mineral pigments used to paint the mural outside, 500 kilometers to the west. The specific clay composition of the ceramic seed containers along the wall, the geochemist traced it to a river valley system 300 kilometers south. Every single major material in this structure was imported. Every piece was brought in from a different direction, from a different region, across distances that make this not a local project, but a continental one. Whatever built this vault, it wasn't a tribe, it was a network. Where did they go? Here is the question that keeps everyone up at night. There are no bodies in the cave. The team swept every section of the floor with ground-penetrating radar. They checked beneath the terra preta layer. They looked behind the bone archways and inside every ceramic container large enough to hold human remains. Nothing. No burial pits, no ash deposits from cremation, no scattered skeletal fragments, no human remains of any kind, from any individual, at any location within the structure. People built this place. People arranged these bones. People laid out these tools with the care of someone who planned to come back for them. People filled those jars with seeds from 500 kilometers away, and then they were gone. Dr. Voss believes she knows the answer, and it is simultaneously the simplest and the heaviest explanation. She thinks the cave was never meant for the builders themselves. The people who constructed this vault built it for a future they would never see. They knew the cataclysm was unsurvivable at their location. They had the mural outside as their record, and they had this cave as their gift. They sealed it, walked out into the cooling darkness of a dying age, and left everything that mattered behind for whoever came next. That is not a primitive response to catastrophe. That is a civilized one. But there are other theories, and some of them go further. The electromagnetic signature of the basalt pillars is unusual. Standard basalt can become magnetized under certain conditions: extreme heat, intense electrical discharge, specific crystalline arrangements. The pillars in this cave are magnetized in a pattern that doesn't match any natural geological process the team could identify. It matches, to a degree that makes researchers uncomfortable, the kind of magnetization you get from repeated, sustained, high-voltage electrical discharge. Some researchers point to legends found in almost every Amazon indigenous culture of people who lived underground, in vast cavern systems lit by their own light, accessed through doorways hidden in ridge faces and riverbanks. The LiDAR data for this region shows tunnel-like formations running for dozens of kilometers beneath the surface, connecting this site to at least 2 others that haven't been excavated yet. Geological formations? Possibly. Or possibly a network of passages that connected a civilization that moved underground before the sky caught fire. And then there are the theorists who look at the precise layout of the tools, the specific magnetization of the walls, the impossible sterility of the black pool, and propose something that sounds like science fiction but won't entirely go away. The idea that this culture understood something about physical reality that we have only just started to theorize. That the electromagnetic environment inside this cave was not accidental, but engineered, and that its purpose was something that goes beyond simple preservation. The tools are too clean. The arrangement is too deliberate. The absence of any human trace is too absolute. Whatever happened to the people who built this place, they left no accident behind. Everything in that cave is where it is on purpose. Rewriting the first chapter. Let's talk about what this actually means for the history we were taught. The standard timeline of human civilization goes roughly like this. For most of human prehistory, people lived in small, mobile hunter-gatherer groups with no fixed settlements, no long-distance trade, and no organized social structures beyond the immediate family band. Then, around 10 to 12,000 years ago, the agricultural revolution began in the Middle East. People started settling down, and slowly, over thousands of years, complexity emerged. Cities appeared in Mesopotamia around 6,000 years ago. Writing followed. Then mathematics, astronomy, architecture, engineering. That is the story. This cave doesn't just challenge that story, it contradicts it at almost every point. The mural outside dates to at least 12,000 years ago. The trade network that sourced materials for this structure spans the entire continent. The engineering of the vault, the basalt columns, the calcite seal, the terra preta floor, the chemical preservation pool represents a level of practical knowledge in geology, chemistry, botany, and structural architecture that the timeline says wasn't available for several thousand more years. And this isn't the only site. The LiDAR survey that found this location also mapped 35 square miles of urban infrastructure above it. Roads, plazas, canals, agricultural terracing, a city that, by any reasonable metric, should not have existed. The seed bank alone forces a philosophical reckoning. To build a doomsday vault, you have to understand that civilizations can end. You have to have enough scientific knowledge of biology to understand seed viability and long-term preservation. You have to have the organizational capacity to source materials from across a continent, coordinate a construction project of this scale, and then make a collective decision to sacrifice the present generation for the benefit of a future one that may never even know your name. That is not primitive behavior. That is not the behavior of people hitting rocks together. That is the behavior of a civilization that had been thinking seriously about its own fragility for a very long time. And the most unsettling part of all of this? The threat they were responding to hasn't gone away. The Younger Dryas impact event is estimated to have been caused by a comet fragment, a fraction of the size of the object that killed the dinosaurs. We track near-Earth objects today. We have observatories scanning the sky for exactly this kind of threat. But our seed vault in Norway has been flooded twice in the last decade due to permafrost melt. Our civilization, with all its technology, has not yet built anything as structurally sound as a sealed chamber in a limestone ridge in the Amazon that held its atmosphere for 12,000 years. These people saw the fire in the sky coming, and they built something that outlasted the disaster, outlasted their own civilization, and outlasted every empire that rose and fell in the millennia between their extinction and our arrival at the hole in the rock face with our diamond-tipped drills. And then there is the global picture. The symbols carved into the obsidian tool handles match motifs found at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, one of the oldest known ceremonial structures on Earth, also dated to around the same period. They appear in megalithic sites in Indonesia. They show up in rock art in southern Africa. This is either the most extraordinary coincidence in archaeological history, or it is evidence of something that the mainstream has resisted accepting: a connected, globe-spanning cultural network that existed before the catastrophe and was largely destroyed by it. Not Atlantis, in the fairy tale sense, not a magical civilization with impossible technology, but a real, human, sophisticated network of peoples who crossed oceans, shared knowledge, built extraordinary things, and were almost entirely wiped out by a cosmic event that happened to occur at the exact moment they were at their peak. We are, very possibly, not the first version of this story. The message in the mountain. Dr. Voss sat at the edge of the black pool for a long time after the rest of the team had moved back to camp. She said later that she kept thinking about the tools laid out on the floor, the way they were arranged, parallel, deliberate, ready. Not like someone had abandoned them in a panic, like someone had set the table for a dinner guest they knew was going to arrive very, very late. Whoever built this place knew they were not going to be there when it was opened. They knew the people who found it would be different from them, would speak different languages, would have forgotten everything they ever knew, and they built it anyway. They spent what were probably the last organized days of their civilization constructing a message in stone and bone and black water that could survive 12,000 years of silence. The message is pretty clear when you stand in that cave and look at it. We were here. We were more than you thought. We saw what was coming, and we did not spend our last days in despair. We spent them building something useful. The world has ended before. Not completely, not permanently, but thoroughly enough that almost every trace of what came before was wiped clean. We are sitting on top of a history that goes far deeper than our textbooks admit. The Amazon alone may contain dozens of sites like this one. The LiDAR data from this single survey covers less than 1% of the basin. There are almost certainly more sealed chambers, more painted walls, more preserved vaults sitting in limestone ridges that nobody has pointed a drill at yet. And each one of them is a chapter we haven't read. So the question isn't really whether this discovery changes history. It does. The question is what we do with that change. Whether we treat it as a curiosity or as a warning, whether we look at a civilization that built a doomsday vault 12,000 years ago and ask ourselves, honestly, whether we are better prepared than they were. They left us the seeds. They left us the tools. They left us the map on the wall with the fire in the sky. Whether we pay attention to it is entirely up to us. If this story made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to go deeper into the archaeology, the impact science, or the global network theory, the links are below. Thanks for watching.